You don't need to believe the stupid things your mind tells you. You know, I spent my whole life thinking that my thoughts were real. Thinking that my thoughts actually they were real. That they mattered, that they dictated reality. I spent all my life living in essentially fantasy. From a young age, start with like books, started reading Harry Potter, then I went to video games, and it just, I lived in my head really. I was bookish in school, I was very nerdy. I was sure I was good grades, but that meant I was terrible at socializing. I wasn't very good at just being, getting along with people and being quite decent. And I just grew up my whole life thinking I was an introvert, but really, I just didn't know how to actually socialize. And I love talking to people. I realized something while I was meditation, really. Us humans who were built to survive on such a harsh world fought with dangers about 6 million years ago, when we're in the savannah and we developed out of Africa. If we just sit still and close our eyes and just meditate for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, if we do that to ourselves, something that would be evolutionarily kind of impossible to conceive of, because that would be such a dangerous thing to do 6 million years ago when we were evolving. Now we're in today's day and age where we can meet our basic needs, have the security, have the walls, electricity, lights, and all these things, these comforts that are unimaginable to our ancestors. Now that we have these things, it's almost as if that Mother Nature has built in some kind of feedback loop, some kind of system where, when we got to a certain point of development, we should, instead of indulging in our basic animal pleasures, look upwards, look above, and like go, let's turn inwards now. Now we've got the outside stuff sorted out, and we've insulated ourselves from the pressure of evolutionary pressures, like things like predators, natural disasters, and insecure food supplies. But even then, we're still living in an age where food isn't always guaranteed, for most people especially. Maybe now we can turn in. Going over the subject, if you don't really investigate who you are, when I meditate, I sort of sit down and I think, okay, who is this? Who has actually experienced this awareness? Who actually am I? Because I don't really know. I'm given a name, I'm given a country I'm told to love, I'm given a religion I'm told to follow. I was given an idea, a map of how I'm supposed to live my life, and I didn't live it that way. I just lived it following off my own basic pleasure, but I'm here now, and I can ask myself, who am I now? Because if you don't investigate yourself, if you don't sit here and say, who am I? Who actually am I? What are my goals? What is my mission? What is my purpose? What actually drives me? If you don't do that, the scary thing that's going to happen is someone else is going to come in and tell you. Everyone else in the entire world is going to tell you what you have to be. They're going to give you a name, a character, identity, and they're going to box mark you. They're going to checkbox you into this kind of framework because it's easy. Humans, we rely on heuristics. We rely on rules of thumb, essentially, to say, this person is this, so they do this, And that's how we use to navigate the modern world, because it's so easy to do that. And to actually consider that every human being we ever meet was once a child, and that child might have had a bad relationship with his parents, and certain things might have happened throughout that person's life that got them to this point, It's so much harder to see the chain of causality that makes a person who they are than to think of the person, on Instagram, for example, or TikTok, whenever having a meltdown, like some Karen having a meltdown, It's so much easier to point and laugh at the person and see them as, oh, they're a Karen, oh, they must be having a meltdown because of that fact, rather than think of the chain of events that brought them to that point, which is almost a possibility, really. It kind of comes on to another point I had about, I'm reading the 48 Laws of Power at the moment. Brilliant book. I would highly recommend it. And one of those points, it talked about anger and not taking anger personally, which I found really unique. You've ever been shouted at by a boss, or you've been shouted at by at work or a customer or something, and we take that anger, we take that rebuttal so deeply, so personally. But the thing is, in that book, he mentions, Robert Greene, I think the author is, he mentions about not taking that anger personally and seeing it as part of a whole chain that person lived through. That anger comes from a place that has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with you, and almost nothing to do with the current situation. It's something that's been building up over time, fermenting and bubbling, and then all of a sudden it comes out in you. And it seems sudden, it seems spur of the moment, but anger isn't really that kind of thing. Anger is something that's been building up in a person for some quite time. And even if the person doesn't know it, even if they don't know they're angry, it will come up and boil out. These are just some kind of some thoughts I've been having really as well, especially. I've been getting very caught up in my thoughts. I've been very much subject to them. And through meditation, I've been able to sit back and just say, wow, I'm not my thoughts. And I shouldn't believe the silly things my mind tells me, I can actually try, or no, I can try, and I remember to do so. That when I'm getting caught in a negative thoughts, like, I've messaged some guy and he's not responded back to me, or I'm thinking about my job and where my career's going, I'm thinking about this, that, and the other, I can just sit back and say, wow, my mind is doing that silly thing. You need to cultivate this kind of loving humor, this kind of hilarity almost to the mind. It sounds ridiculous. We put so much pressure on our brains, our brain power, intellect. Oh, we're knowledge workers. This is the way of the 21st century. Everything's about knowledge and data, but our minds aren't always our best enemy. Our brain isn't always going to help us. Our brain is set in patterns and there's certain ways of thinking that aren't always productive. You think that's not true? Look at video games, look at porn, look at all these other addictions. They're all born of the mind because all the precedents we put on the mind, it's simply an engine of duality at the end of the day. It's got higher levels of thinking. We've got the reptilian, the mammalian, and then obviously the human brain, We've got all those levels of thinking, but the mind is really just an engine of duality. What I mean by that is that all the mind does, on a very basic level, it says, this feels good, go towards this feels bad, go away from this. That helped us so many million years ago. I'm gonna sound like a broken record and say so many million years ago because we haven't really changed that much. Realistically speaking, the 6 million years we've been here, we've not changed that much. Maybe our prefrontal cortex may have gotten bigger, maybe our ways of imagery and association may be a bit different to our ancestors. But realistically, we're here running here on outdated hardware. And I really do believe, for us humans to survive and to go on, maybe to explore the stars and get off this earth, we have to actually undergo another evolution. But it won't be an evolution triggered by external forces, like a lack of food population or needing to be faster, stronger, fitter. It's going to be an evolution triggered by looking into ourselves. It's probably going to be the first evolution that humans actually instigate on themselves. And while we can talk about things like, gene technology and, CRISPR, epigenetics, artificial reality and, sort of cyborg, bioengineering, all that sort of stuff, those things are too far out there and too extreme and too almost, and maybe I won't see them in my lifetime, and maybe you won't, maybe we will. But until that point really happens, and that's where we get as humankind, what can we do now at this moment? We can actually sit here and actually think, we can turn inwards. We can actually think, do we really need all these things? Do we really need to buy this next thing, this next car, The way adverts target us, we're so enslaved to that kind of always wanting the next thing. Because our thoughts are just hinged on scarcity. We were built to be creatures obsessed with scarcity. Because scarcity meant death. And out there in the savannah, 6 million years ago, there was real scarcity. There wasn't enough stuff. And we live in an age of so much ridiculous abundance. And we're killing ourselves with it. Maybe it's extreme. Maybe it's very extreme. And I hope, you don't go through the same thing I did. But my regulation of abundancy, I couldn't control it. And my addiction to, always having more, always having the next thing, nearly killed me. But I'm here today and I have to realize, my brain doesn't have the answers. But I do have the skills around me to improve my brain. And you know what? I know what the answers are. I'm just not doing them. But it's, you know what I'm so grateful for now? Just sometimes when I'm getting in those thought cycles, I'm obsessing about someone who didn't get back to me, I'm obsessing about this person or that person, I'm obsessing about the people who trigger the same feelings of anxiety and attachment in me that I've not been able to deal with. I could just step back and say, wow, look at my brain, it's talking the same silly stuff as was before. Look how silly it is. Just laughing at it, laughing friendly with it, How silly is that mind of mine? How sort of, hooked is it on that kind of terrible thought or that hope for the future? How clinging it is to it, And just being able to let go of that and just, wow, okay. My mind's just doing that thing again that it always does. It's just making thoughts and just getting wrapped up in them. It's just getting tangled up in them. And cultivating this disenchantment to thinking it's a really powerful practice. It's a very powerful practice. I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you. And I hope this helps, because all I can do is share with you what's worked for me, I really appreciate you being here and taking the time. Take care, guys. Remember, find your purpose over pleasure.